trying to explain to my 3-year-old son that mom has to go away for a while, and he's asking why.
I'm Rosemary Green, and this is Life Jolt. It's a CBC podcast about women in the correctional system. You'll hear our struggles.
Like, they're denying me human contact.
And our successes.
He had his crib, he had his mom, he had his toys. It was amazing for everyone, even the guards.
Available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is a CBC podcast.
I'm announcing that we're lifting more restrictions, starting with the Newfoundland and Labrador border. You will no longer have to self-isolate for those 14 days in Nova Scotia.
While most of this country is headed back into lockdown, things are looking up in Atlantic Canada. Low case counts mean that restrictions are actually being lifted. In Nova Scotia, retail stores and gyms are now open at full capacity.
We've literally had to be operating at like maybe 5 to 6 capacity in our store at once. So knowing that we can be 100% capacity coming for spring and summer, amazing.
There's always that little bit of concern that, hey, shoot, I can't make it in, I can't get to class on time. And we feel badly when you have to refuse somebody. So this will be more exciting that they won't have to worry as much.
Restaurants and bars are open too, and it sounds like Haligonians are ready for happy hour. Joe McGinnis is co-owner of Dirty Nelly's Pub. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Matt. How are you?
Well, I'm okay. How about you set us up for Friday night? What do you expect Friday night to be like at Dirty Nelly's?
Well, believe it or not, sunny, 14, 15 degrees. The patios will be open. Downtown Halifax, once the sun comes out, everybody wants to hit the patios. So we do anticipate a busy day at Dirty Nelly's. And as the evening goes on, hopefully the weather will cooperate, and we have entertainment playing in the afternoon and then in the evening time through till 11 p.m.
I've heard there's no dancing allowed, though.
Unfortunately not. There's no dancing.
How do you is that difficult to enforce, given the fact that people have been under restrictions such as they are for so long?
For those people who know Nova Scotians, know music is in their DNA, and they love to get up and dance. And it's a matter of controlling the music and not getting the audience to the point that they want to get up and dance. But people have adapted to dancing while sitting. Moving their bodies and shaking while they're sitting down. So it's just another example of pivoting in this moment of COVID.
What is the toughest part of all of this last year been like for you and your staff?
Certainly, back in March, April, it was difficult not knowing where we were going. But I think our leaders, our two premiers, Premier McNeil and now Premier Rankin, and under the guidance of Dr. Strang, in addition with the support that it's been provided by the federal government, has given us hope. We're treading water. We're holding it together. And it has been adapting and being optimistic. We are optimistic that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that we can welcome people into our patios, our beer gardens. And we're hospitalitarians. We want to welcome people into our establishments. And people, as I say, here in Nova Scotia are very, very social. And unfortunately, in the social environment, it's asking people to sit down and wear masks. And for the most part, the public here have been phenomenal and understanding of the situation that we're going through. And we are very, very thankful here in Atlantic Canada in that we see on the news every day what's going on in the rest of the country and indeed the rest of the world. So we're extremely fortunate to be in the position that we are in.
I want to ask you about that just in a moment. But I mean, as a business person, the unpredictability of it must be torture in some ways, because you don't know whether the money will be coming in, the money that you need to keep the lights on.
There's no doubt it has been difficult, but the wage subsidy, the rent subsidy, the grants, the various different financial establishments, the banks they're there to support us. They do know that Main Street is the lifeblood of every community. And we know that we're in a difficult time, and that if we collectively as a community work together, keep our businesses open, bring our employees back to work, we know our customers will support us and our guests will return eventually once we get through this.
So before I let you go, what's a word of encouragement that you would give to pub owners in other parts of this country who can't see the end of this yet, who are in many places heading back into another lockdown and wondering whether they'll be able to hang on?
There is light at the end of the tunnel. Where you can pivot, If you can do takeout delivery, utilize social media in order to, communicate to your guests what you're going through. We do believe in a sense of community that our guests, and if you've built up a loyal clientele, they will return. They are looking for an opportunity to socialize with their families, with their friends, go out and have celebrations again, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. But the public does need to follow directions from our leaders, and here Dr. Strang has been given daily updates to Nova Scotians, and they followed his direction, following tracing. Utilizing tracing apps, masking, social distancing, and people have followed it, and we as a province have benefited by everybody coming together.
Well, enjoy yourself this weekend, and it'll be great. I'm proud of what people in the province have done, and maybe just a little bit jealous as well. Joe, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Joe McGuinness, co-owner of Dirty Nelly's Irish Pub in Halifax. He mentioned Dr. Robert Strang. He's guided Nova Scotia through the pandemic, helping that province steer clear of a third wave thus far. He is Nova Scotia's Chief Medical Officer of Health and joins me from Halifax. Doctor, good morning to you.
Good morning.
In many ways, as you well know, Nova Scotia has become the envy of Canada for its success in this pandemic. How do you think you got to where you are now?
So I think there's a few key factors. I have to start by acknowledging that we have some advantages by our geography, much more rural, dispersed people. We don't have large urban centers. Even Halifax is, 500,000 people. So we don't have the large, very dense urban population. So where COVID really can spread. So we have some advantages. But I think early on we realized that we needed to protect ourselves like the other Atlantic provinces. Our border measures are critically important. They're not perfect, but what they do is they slow down having the vast majority of people having to quarantine if they come to this province. Very much slows down the entrance of COVID, limits the number of cases that can come in, keeps it within our capacity. We've invested heavily and have, I think, a very innovative testing strategy. We do a lot of asymptomatic testing, which helps us really detect any virus very early on. Leadership's been very important, that we've had strong leadership, that we have. The COVID has, and the protection of the health and safety of Nova Scotians has been, both with Premier McNeil and Premier Rankin, first and foremost. We have not politicized COVID, and we've understood, I think, to their credit, within government, that actually good public health is good economics. That when we've had to act quickly, and we've tightened down very quickly early on, and people understand that actually if you do that, it puts you up in, even from an economic perspective, put you in a situation where you can recover as early as possible. So we haven't had this dynamic of public health versus the economy. We understand that the two go hand in hand, but I think one of the largest pieces has been how Nova Scotians, and Mr. McGuinness spoke to it, have bought into this. And I think success breeds success. People see that if they commit, and the mantra has been that we need to keep each other safe and work together, and people have seen that actually works. So we have really good buy-in. People trust each other. They trust the leadership and the direction we're going, and they can see the results of that. So all those together have kept us in a good space, but it's very precarious as we look at what's around us, even in the rest of the country.
I was going to say, when you look at what's happening in other parts of the country, in BC, Alberta, Quebec, Ontario, Saskatchewan, what goes through your mind?
Makes me extremely nervous, and I wake up every day saying, "Okay, what's our case count from the 24 hours before?" We have to, but to me, the message that I continue to deliver to Nova Scotians is that we can't relax. We have to stick with our border measures. Everything that's kept us safe for the year plus now, we have to stick with that while we are ramping up our vaccine and getting as many people vaccinated as quickly as possible. We're on target for having every adult Nova Scotian offered vaccine by the middle of June. So if we can get through the next couple of months, I think then we're starting to be in a place where we have enough population immunity from the vaccine to start to think about what the future could be with that level of protection.
If you go back a year, where we were was a pandemic that was hitting people, particularly in long-term care homes, and Nova Scotia was not immune to that. 53 of the 66 people who died from COVID in the province died linked to a single outbreak at a nursing home in Halifax. What do you hope we have learned collectively from that?
So, I mean, absolutely. We're understanding the vulnerabilities in seniors, especially seniors who are living in what we call congregate living situations, where they're living together, and that we need to do everything we can to prevent the introduction of the COVID virus into those living situations, because once it's in there, it's very difficult to control.
People have said that this could be a reckoning in terms of long-term care, not just there, but I mean, if you take a look at what happened right across this country. Do you see that?
Absolutely. So I think, for me as a public health person, I mean, we have to acknowledge that how we care for seniors in this country, we need to think differently, not just from an infection control perspective, but certainly when you bring large numbers of very vulnerable people together, that we put them at risk. What we don't acknowledge is that every year influenza goes through long-term care facilities and people die because of that. We've been very complacent about that for years and years and years. So I think we need to fundamentally look at how we care for seniors in a more compassionate way, and large congregate living situations. How do we build perhaps more, if we are going to use those models, how do we make them safer in terms of better infection control, things about staffing, shared rooms, all those kind of pieces. So there's lots we need to think about that predate COVID. COVID has just highlighted some of those, as it has highlighted other disparities in our community. Where COVID is having an impact in vulnerable populations, whether they're people who are precariously employed with service type jobs, low income, and they have no alternative but to go to work. Marginalized populations in other ways, or which have bearing the greatest burden of COVID. There's many disparities in our community that across the country, or that COVID is actually highlighting. And so what's our willingness to actually make those better?
Just in the last few seconds that we have, it's been a hard year for everyone. You right on the front lines of dealing with, and Joe talked about being out there and giving information every day to the public. How are you holding up in this?
I'm tired. I'm knowing on my chief medical officer of health colleagues, we're all tired. This weighs heavily. The type of decisions we have to make, often with less than complete information. And what the challenging part is that all the restrictions we necessarily put in place when we have to use them, they all have their own set of impacts, mental health issues, isolation. So none of these are easy decisions to make. And but finding the balance between controlling COVID, but also knowing that everything we do has that negative impact, that weighs heavily.
It's good to hear what's happening there. And as I say, there are a lot of people across this country who are looking with some envy at what's going on in your province. Doctor, thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Have a good day.
And you, Dr. Robert Strang, is the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the province of Nova Scotia.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.